Hey all, this is 012Boku, and I'm coming at you with another review of, yep, you guessed it, Fullmetal Alchemist Season 1, the original once again. We are back on that, and we have recently watched, make sure that I'm on the right thing. Oh, yeah, as you see my notes there. Fullmetal Alchemist, Episode 22, Created Human. This is where we start to see what happened when Edward discovered the red glow room, which he now knows is a unrefined Philosepher stone. He's basically being told by Tucker that, it's something that Marco was working on in the lab, and that, they don't know who their masters are, but it was unrefined. And Edward sort of struggles wanting to use this stone, and he's thinking, these were once people, and, Tucker and even number 48, the older Slicer brother, go, doing what you would do would be a mercy. You can't bring him back from the dead. You should just go forward, try to work on this and do it and see what you can make of it. And, they basically both say that life, for what they have, would be a mercy to do what he did, because their lives, whatever these souls were, have no value. And Edward thinks, well, Alphonse has value, I'll do this for him. We see where he starts to look through the labs, checking up above the ceiling, and then he also sees where there's more room of the red glow. And then you have Boss Gran, who as we know is envy in disguise, open up a trap door, and all the prisoners they brought out of the prison have been shuffled in there, and they're probably going to use these prisoners as human sacrifices. Salt J. Kimbley is also one of them, and the prisoners think it is Boss Gran, and Kimbley knows that it's not Boss Gran, that it's somebody different. And so the prisoners are there being ready for sacrifice. And as Edward is trying to set this up, you have Alphonse and Scar still fighting Gluttony and Lust, and Gluttony is having his way with Scar, and he basically hits Scar into a wall. Scar skids and falls down into the hole where we once saw Greed. Gluttony tries to go to fight him, but he's a little curious, and then he sees that's where Scar fell into, and he goes, "Oh, I hate that place," and he backs off, not wanting to finish off Scar, because Gluttony's always been like a child, who is young at heart, but, just a child who has a tantrum and, can't stop eating, and Lust is like his motherly type person. So he backs off from Scar, not wanting to finish him off, because he does not want to go where Scar is. Scar does eventually wake up and try to find out what's going on, because at this time, when Alphonse is alone with Lust tells Alphonse that they're homunculi. Alphonse doesn't want to believe it, that there's no such thing as artificially created humans, and Lust says, oh, we're real. Don't you remember the fireworks, boy? You saw me once before. Bringing it back to all those episodes with Maja Hall, showing how, once again, like me and Jarek and others have said who, support the show, that, again, there's no bad episode. There's nothing that, really takes away from it or detracts from it. Every episode has a point, a meaning, a place within this show. It really is, just great overall stuff, and I love how this show had great continuity. And again, I know Brotherhood has got great continuity too, but again, the more romanticized versus this, but again, we'll get into it later. But the thing is, Alphonse doesn't even have time to attack Lust, because Lust uses her sharp, long fingers to basically trap and pin Alphonse to a wall. You have Gluttony come out and says, "Can I eat him now?" Like, completely demonic-like, and he starts chewing and eating away Alphonse's leg, and his saliva is like made of acid, and it starts to dissolve his legs. And then we soon know that they'll dissolve all of Alphonse's limbs, and Alphonse sadly becomes captured. We go back to Edward and Tucker, where Edward is, refixing the seals of the alchemic, scripting rune or carving or whatever you want to call it. And he changes the symbol to a 7-prong symbols. So I'm like, almost like the seven gates or seven circles of hell, or however you want to say it. That's how I say it. Or maybe like the seven holy things, because I know 7 is a number that both exist for heaven and hell. Is sort of like 6 and 666 and all that type of stuff. So again, it's sort of funny how it mirrors, I think, both a good and evil point there. And he does the same for the ceiling, and he's about to set up his next phase of the thing. And you have the prisoners wanting to be released at this time. They're screaming to be let out. And Kimberly, calm as a cucumber, basically just like one of the prisoners tells him who he thinks he is, and Kimberly says he's right, and then his hands are locked up so he can't bring them together, but he touches another prisoner, switching the alchemic blood, the blood in his body with his alchemy to make a, like my friend Jarek said, which I would agree with him, a hydrogen explosion, because he gets the prisoner up to the red walls, his body's starting to seize as he's becoming an explosive, and as soon as he touches the red wall, boom, explosive, the ceiling breaks open, it collapses down before them, and you have Kimberly, who got away, because you don't see Kimberly among the prisoners at this point. So you have all the other prisoners down there, you have Edward down there, Tucker. Edward sees the prisoners, and he's saying, why are scientists here? And Tucker's like, last time I checked, I thought prisoners didn't wear, or scientists didn't wear prison uniforms. And sorry if I'm whispering like that, that's how Tucker talks now. Like Edward looks at him again, and he sees that they are prisoners, and he's like, well, what's going on here? I almost transmuted these people. Why is this happening? I can't do this. And then you have Tucker basically let out this like whispery, shrill, demonic almost laugh himself, saying, this is what this is made of. We can't keep continuing this. So not only are you going to use the red water that exists for the unrefined Philosopher's Stone, you are also going to use it using these prisoners to create a new Philosopher's Stone. And he doesn't hide or shy away from the fact. We really don't hear the Slicer brother say anything about this or mention any of it. But, you have the prisoners who are like freaking out and scared. They try to run away. Gluttony comes into the room and backs them back in. Lust comes in carrying Alphonse. And then you also have Envy, who comes in like Boss Gron. Edward tries to attack Envy, but he dodges, and Envy's like, oh, poor little pipsqueak, what gave me away? I saw Boss Gron, die in front of me, so that's not real. And then he's like, oh, you think so? So, and also I forgot to mention Edward's arm breaks. I mean, it's still attached to him, but it's hanging there, so he really has no use of it. And Envy just kicks him around and knocks him down and starts beating him anytime he has questions, because Alphonse says they're homunculi, they're artificial created humans, and Edward says, no, that's impossible, that would mean who created you guys, and Envy kicks him again, saying, we weren't created, we were born, don't get this messed up. And Envy seems like he wants to kill Edward Elric anyway, because he's like, you have his face, you have the face of the man I despise, and so that's a huge question mark there. What does Envy mean by that? But Lust gets Envy to stop, and apparently all these homunculi want to become human, and Lust actually says it. She has a little devious femme fatale grin on her face, but she literally says it with a nice, cute, loving response. We want to become human, like that. It's like she's almost telling Edward, is that too much to ask to become human, and have all this? And he's like just trying to figure everything out, questioning everything. Like, why would they do this? Alphonse is telling Edward not to do this anymore. They're people. We can't kill them. Edward is struggling. They're people. How did this happen? We were doing this of our own. And Lust and Envy both say that, you may have had your own reasons for doing this, but we were having alchemists like you and everybody else, find what we're doing, because we can't do, homunculi can't do this on your own, so we needed alchemic humans who knew alchemy to help us through this process. So, and they mention people like they already brought it back to Maja Hall. They mentioned the scientist Mugir, Mugir, I think they call him in English, because it's like Mugwar in Japanese, but Mugir in English, if you remember him, with the red water in the one town, which Envy says they were a part of. You had, or Lust says they were a part of, they mentioned how they tipped this place off to Marco, and this is where they had Marco make all the experiments with the Philosopher's Stone. You had, they mentioned how they were using Tucker's Chimera research to help build all this and to do things, and Tucker said he went right along with it, because once they have the Philosopher's Stone, he can recreate Nina and bring her back and give her a soul from the memories of his mind to create a more perfect Nina, and Jarek pointed that out, a perfect Nina. So a daughter that is perfect in every way to him, making Tucker really mad here, like mad is insane, if you guys don't get what I'm getting at. And again, just these, noble but terrible aspirations from these homunculi and Shao Tucker. And, Edward is just struggling with it, because he's like, well, we did this, how can we be manipulated? And, Alphonse says, Edward, still don't do this, we're kids. I know you think we had to become adults and we had to do this early. You're a kid, I'm a kid, don't do this, we know this ain't right. And Lust basically says, you both stopped being kids the minute you both joined the military. And they're like, you, suit of armor, you may not have chosen and followed your brother, but you've been following him in lockstep. So you may be unofficial, but you followed him, and your brother chose to become a dog of the military. So it's too late to decry being children now. And you have Edward, who's struggling with this. He's like crying, just like showing all this emotion over what's been going on. But then he looks at his brother, because he sees where, Envy and Lust, Envy's beating on Edward still. Lust picks up, number 48, basically touches his blood rune seal, kills him. And then you have, them about to do the same with, Alphonse. And Edward, that's where Edward breaks. Don't hurt my brother. Don't hurt him, please. He's all I've got. And then he goes forward. He's able to still clap his hand, because his hand, that's, his metal hand that's limp, claps it. And then he's about to touch it. Alphonse is screaming, begging, telling his brother not to do this, think about this. And believe it or not, as soon as he's almost about to touch it, the prisoners are fearful, the homunculi, Tucker are like, oh, is he really going to do it? And then, Edward looks like he's going to do it, but then he hesitates at the last second and says, Alphonse, I'm sorry, forgive me, I can't. Even though Alphonse is already saying don't do it, but, you can tell Edward's desperation almost went out, thinking, even though my brother's telling me not to do it, I know he would really want this, so, hey, so Edward himself is a little lost in his confused thoughts, but when he refuses to do it, Envy's about to pounce on him, and this is where I'll go to this point. You have where the military, Major Alex Louis Armstrong, Maria Ross, and Denny Block have gone to Maze Hughes, Colonel Maze Hughes, to tell him what's been going on. Maze Hughes, was calling Roy. There was a real funny quick scene where we have Roy Mustang and all his men, Reza Hawkeye, everybody else, saying, we haven't been featured in a while. And, he hangs up the phone on him. And it was a great, jokey fourth wall break. But you have Maze Hughes wanting to lead this thing to help the Elric brothers out and not leave them in limbo, and wanting to help them. And it seems like they may go to the Fuhrer, or they were not, but they basically have a whole platoon of men, and they're running through Central, trying to get everything ready. It looks like they were almost about to tell the Fuhrer. The Fuhrer Bradley comes out in pajamas, like he was sleeping in a barrack somewhere, because he just comes out this side door, and he's like, what seems to be the trouble? And Macy's about to say, Fuhrer, we have news. Let me guess. It turns out Bosgron and Laboratory 5 and the rumors were all that it was supposed to be, huh? And, you have everybody shocked by this, and, Maze Hughes is already starting to think of certain things, and he basically said, well, the Fuhrer says, not Maze Hughes, but the Fuhrer says that, I knew what Boss Graham was doing in Laboratory 5. I understood it. I thought they were for good reasons, and he was doing things. I never understood or knew the level of the human experimentation and the dangers that were going on. And if you're telling me those two boys are there, I will accompany with you this, because we cannot lose two great alchemists to this folly. And he accompanies, the troops there. And you have Maze Hughes, who's thinking, you knew about this all the time, didn't you? If you're thinking, they can't really trust him. You have Maria Ross, who's shining with admiration, knowing that the Fuhrer is going to be backing them up. So they head there, and the goal is to save the Elrics, kill whatever else inside, or if they don't kill them, if anything surrenders, apprehend them. And they go in, but before that happens, you have Scar, like I said, who got back up, and basically breaks through the wall, and as he breaks through the wall, you have the Philosepher's Stone that's already been made, breaking out, flowing like an ocean river on the floor. You have him tell Edward to save his brother, get out of here at all costs, focus on him, I'll deal with this riffraff. And then you have Edward trying to get up to go to get his brother to get away, and he steps on it, and it's his human foot that steps on it. And if you remember, Edward is highly alchemical, and he was already getting ready to do this spell. He probably didn't wipe or reverse anything away. It was just in the moment where he forgot. So his human foot steps on this thing, and even though he's got a boot on, it's like that's still enough. An organic material of a real thing, of a part of his body, steps on this thing, and it reacts to him to where Lust says he's becoming like a god. Blue lightning, flame, everything going crazy. The whole lab is breaking apart. You have the unrefined Philosopher's Stone just flooding everywhere. Tucker and the homunculi run away, and then he's just out of control. All of a sudden, though, you have the military moving throughout the base. They see Kimberly. They were about to apprehend him or fire on him at least, and then you have Greed and his chimera human people attack the military, and it looks like almost Greed and Kimberly are at the stir up. Like Greed was almost going to ask Kimberly to join him. I forget what happens here because, like I said, it's been a long time since I've seen this. So that's where we last see them. And then you have Major Armstrong, Denny Block, and Maria Ross come to the room. They're seeing the overpowered Edward, just wide-eyed and in shock over this reaction getting at him. And then you have Maria Ross just fighting through it, getting towards him. She isn't getting hurt or anything, but all she does is put her arms around him, and Edward calms down, and he seems to lose consciousness afterwards, like, a mother's touch, as it were. And then you have the homunculi, Gluttony, Lust, and Envy all come out dressed in military uniforms in disguise. And then, there's the Fuhrer's secretary who's there, and she looks right at the three of them and says, "Good work, soldiers." So basically going on that part that the Fuhrer's secretary is more than she seems. And like we said, the Fuhrer's secretary looks like Trisha Elric, which is already weird to begin with. And then you have Alex Louis Armstrong coming out carrying both the Elric brothers, and everybody applauds, and the Fuhrer's really happy that they got them out, and that's how the episode ends. This, and again, I know I went a little long here in the tooth, but again, there was a huge amount that I wanted to explain because I love this episode. And I mean, everything that you saw there was just so well done, and the acting in this episode is just, everybody was good. Not everybody had a stellar performance, but it was really good for what it was. Again, I have to give top props to these two actors, Edward, Vic Mignogna, Romy Paku. Really good performances from both Romy Paku and Vic Mignogna. Vic, I think, stole it a little bit. Romy Paku's was good, but Vic Mignogna just stole it. The pain and everything that he was fighting out in this episode just drove him. Alphonse, Aaron Dismuke, Rie Kugamiya, again, also good as Alphonse as always, but Aaron Dismuke really, again, because, again, he's probably really a good actor for being an 11 or 12-year-old boy whenever he did this, and his pain is just coming out when he's trying to reason with Edward not to kill these people, not to fall for the homunculus trap. to give them what he wants because they're going to lose too much to do this, is just right there. I have to give it also to, let's see, I will say basically Lust, Laura Bailey, Yuka Sato, Envy, Wendy Powell, Mayumi Yamaguchi, Gluttony, Chris Kaysen, Yasuhiro Takada, and I also have to say Tucker, Chuck Huber, Makoto Nagai. I mean, like I said, everybody was great in this episode, but those guys, especially Tucker and the Homunculi, great performances, great villainous downing deeds, darkness, but then knowing that there's a reason and a truth and a desperation in them wanting to become human. How are they being promised to become human? Who promised this? What is going on within these things that we don't see? So it adds another layer to the show that we're seeing the villains, but now we're seeing a bigger villain behind these villains. Who's really the puppet master pulling the string behind Tucker, the other alchemist, and the homunculi? So it's just really good. And again, Envy's just hatred for whatever reason of Edward, really good. Wendy Powell and where was it again? Wendy Powell and Mayumi Yamaguchi just bring it out. Gluttony, Chris Kaysen, Yasuhiro Takada. I have to say Chris Kaysen really brought out the creepiness of Gluttony again, and just both Chris Kaysen and Yasuhiro Takada brought out also the just great childlike interaction. And Lust, Laura Bailey, Yuka Sato. What a way to be a great femme fatale. What a way to just bring out her things. And the way she just says we want to become human and know that you believe her on it. It's just well sold. And Tucker, Chuck Huber, Makoto Nagai, villainous, curious, a guy who you can tell, even after trying to bring his daughter back, who's become a bear chimera thing himself, has not really changed. And the fact that Makoto Nagai and Chuck Huber both whisper in this, mode is just creepy. It's very creepy. And I have to also say that Chuck Huber's laugh, when he laughs demonically in that whisper, sends chills down the spine a little bit. And overall, this was a great episode, and such a good episode right before the first season ends that it's now showing there's a lot more going on than what we know and what we've been shown. So again, who's the puppet master? Why do the homunculi want this so badly? Because again, they're artificial humans. It's clear they would want to become human, but why do they want to become human this badly? Who's giving them this gift of promise? And is it really for them, or is there something deeper? Because as you've known from what we've seen with Brotherhood, they've even said in Brotherhood the homunculi are just a means to an end. And it seems like they're okay with that, but have they really been okay with that? And I don't mean to spoil it. Brotherhood does not go into that deeply enough. They do with greed. I'll give a spoiler on that right now. They do with greed, but they really don't with anyone else. And it is a little fucking disappointing, and not to put that emphasis on it, but it is. But, again, what do you guys think? Do you guys like how this episode turned out? Do you like what it represents and what it does? What do you think about, again, this whole show in general? Just leave a comment down below and we'll get this discussion going. Until then, 012 Boku, and I'll see you guys later, alright?